It's been 6 long months. 6 months since my life turned upside down. 6 months since I was fired for no reason at all. Now, my days are a blur of exhaustion. I juggle 5 jobs, working from the first light of dawn until the city is deep in slumber, just to scrape together enough money for rent. Every single penny is precious, squirreled away for bills that never seem to stop coming. My diet. Let's just say I've become a connoisseur of instant ramen cups. Chicken, beef, shrimp. I've tried them all, more times than I can count. It's the only thing I can afford. Every time I have a spare moment, which isn't often, my mind drifts back to that day. The memory is a constant source of stress, a knot in my stomach that never unties. The image of my boss, my incredibly handsome alpha boss, is burned into my brain. Handsome, annoyingly, devastatingly handsome. That's the real problem, isn't it? I've been hopelessly in love with him for years. From the moment I first saw him, with his sharp suit, his confident stride, and that scent, that powerful, intoxicating alpha scent that made my inner omega swoon, I admired him from afar, content just to be in his orbit, to do my best work for him. That's why I can't bring myself to hate him, even after what he did. I try, believe me, I try to muster up some anger, some resentment, but all I feel is this deep, aching confusion and hurt. The words still echo in my ears, as cold and sharp as glass. You're fired. Effective immediately. That was it. It's no explanation, no reason, not even a glance in my direction. He just said the words and turned away, leaving me standing there, my world collapsing around me. I replayed our every interaction, every project, every report. I was a good employee, dedicated, always on time, always exceeding expectations. There was no professional reason to let me go. So why? The question has haunted my every waking moment for the past 180 days. Tonight is Friday, the end of another grueling week. Instead of collapsing into my lumpy mattress, I found myself at a dimly lit bar, nursing a cheap beer. I wanted to drink away my sorrow, my rotten fate. One drink turned into 2, then 3. The more I drank, the more the injustice of it all burned in my chest. Why should I be the one suffering? Why am I eating instant noodles while he's probably dining at some fancy restaurant? Reckless, alcohol-fueled ideas started to form in my hazy mind. It was crazy. It was stupid. But in my drunken state, it felt like the only solution. I was going to rob him. I stumbled out of the bar and made my way to a 24-hour supermarket. My grand weapon of choice. A single, perfectly curved banana. I bought it, along with a black plastic bag. Standing outside, I carefully wrapped the banana in the bag, creating a vaguely menacing shape. I tucked my weapon into the inside pocket of my jacket, feeling a strange mix of terror and determination. I knew my boss's schedule. I knew he was a workaholic, often staying late, especially on Fridays, to get a head start on the next week. It was one of the things I used to admire about him. Now, I was using that knowledge against him. I started the long walk to his office building. It took me nearly 2 hours, my drunken legs unsteady, my body swaying with every step. The cool night air did little to sober me up. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw him. Bathed in the glow of the streetlights, he looked just as captivating as ever. He was on the phone, his deep voice a low murmur, as he walked toward his sleek black sedan. This was it, now or never. My breath hitched. Taking a shaky step forward, I pulled the plastic-wrapped banana from my jacket. As he reached for his car door, I lunged forward, pressing the lumpy object firmly into his back. Money or die, I growled, trying to make my voice sound as intimidating as possible. He froze, his whole body going rigid with surprise. I didn't give him a chance to think. I shoved him toward the open passenger door. He stumbled into the seat, and I quickly slid aside, locking the doors. The luxurious scent of leather and his personal alpha scent filled the small space, making my head spin even more. He turned to look at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then the words came tumbling out of me, a torrent of frustration and pain. "Sir," I started, my voice cracking. Why did you fire me? Why are you so cruel?" Tears I'd been holding back for months started to stream down my face. "Do you have any idea what I've been through? I'm drowning in bills. I can't afford to eat. I'm living on ramen because of you." My confession was a messy, tearful jumble of all the suffering I'd endured. And there, in the confines of his own car, with a banana pressed against his side, I finally demanded the answer that had been denied to me for 6 miserable months. He just sat there, silent, his expression unreadable, and for the first time, I saw something other than cold professionalism in his eyes. It looked like shock, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of regret. The world just went blurry. All the stress, the hunger, the sheer exhaustion from the last 6 months finally boiled over. I remember grabbing the front of his perfectly tailored suit, the expensive fabric bunching up in my desperate fists. Words tumbled out of my mouth, a messy, tear-filled rant about how tired I was, how my stomach ached with a constant gnawing hunger, how I was just so done with everything. I was shaking him, my body trembling with a mix of anger and despair. It was a pathetic sight, I'm sure. The last thing I remember is the world spinning faster and faster before everything went black. I blinked, and a stark white ceiling came into focus. My head was pounding, a dull, persistent ache behind my eyes. I sat up too quickly, a wave of dizziness washing over me. Panic started to creep in as I took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was all sleek lines and muted colors, black, gray, chrome. This was definitely not my cramped, cluttered apartment. Damn it, I muttered, rubbing my temples. Where am I? My first thought was a jolt of fear. I quickly looked down at myself, my hands checking my clothes. Still on, still intact. A small sigh of relief escaped me. Thank God. Pushing myself off the ridiculously comfortable bed, I tiptoed toward the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I needed to get out of here, quietly. I cracked the door open just enough to peek out. The sounds of a home drifted from somewhere nearby, the gentle hum of a coffee machine, the soft sizzle of a pan on a stove. It smelled like bacon and fresh coffee, and my stomach growled in betrayal. Someone was here. Someone was cooking. I took a deep breath and decided to make a run for it. I slipped out of the room, my bare feet silent on the cool, polished floor. I moved like a shadow, trying to be invisible, heading for what I hoped was the front door. Just as I thought I was in the clear, a voice cut through the air, smooth and deep, stopping me dead in my tracks. My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. It was the voice that haunted my dreams every single night, the voice I desperately tried to forget. I turned around slowly, my escape plan crumbling to dust. There he was, my boss Dante, standing by a kitchen island, looking impossibly calm. He gestured with a spatula towards a stool. "Have a seat," he said, his expression unreadable. "Breakfast is ready." Numbly, I did as I was told. I perched on the edge of the kitchen bar stool, my mind reeling. I looked around, truly seeing the place for the first time. It was a penthouse. Floor 2, ceiling windows wrapped around the entire living space, revealing a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. The morning sun streamed in, making everything gleam. It was a world away from my life, a world I had no business being in. Dante placed a plate in front of me. It was piled high with fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and toast. My stomach rumbled again, louder this time. I hadn't had a proper meal in, I couldn't even remember how long. "Eat," he commanded, his voice softer now. I didn't need to be told twice. I picked up the fork and started eating, almost inhaling the food. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. As I ate, I stole glances at him. He moved around the kitchen with an easy, confident grace, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. He was still in his suit from yesterday, but his tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms. Why was he doing this? Why was I here? The man who made my work life a living hell, the alpha I had been trying to avoid, was now making me breakfast in his ridiculously luxurious penthouse. He slid a mug of coffee towards me and leaned against the counter, sipping his own. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken questions. I was the one who broke it. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I braced myself for a sarcastic reply, a dismissal, anything but the look he gave me. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating at the office, were filled with something else. Something I couldn't quite name. Dante stepped in front of me, his shadow completely covering mine. He pulled out a black plastic bag and dangled it between us. "Here," he said, his voice low and rumbling. My heart hammered against my ribs. You were trying to scare me with this last night, right? In front of my office? I looked up at him and his eyes were filled with amusement, a stark contrast to the stern set of his jaw. He was trying to look intimidating, I could tell, but the corner of his mouth twitched, betraying a tiny, almost unnoticeable smile. My face flushed with heat.
Oh no.
The rambling, the crying, I remembered it all in a mortifying flash. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could disappear. I'm sorry, I stammered, not daring to look at him. I didn't mean to. It was unprofessional. I'll just go. I started to slide off the stool, ready to make my escape for the second time, but his voice stopped me again. Stay. It wasn't a question. It was a command, but it lacked his usual demanding tone. It was gentle. Finish your breakfast, Liam. He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. He's my boss. But hearing him say it in this context, in his home, felt different. It felt personal. I slowly sat back down, my mind a whirlwind of confusion. What was happening? For 6 months, he had been the bane of my existence. The impossible deadlines, the cutting remarks, the constant pressure. I was convinced he hated me. But now, this didn't make any sense. After I finished eating, he took my plate and put it in the sink. There's a change of clothes in the room you were in, he said, his back still to me. They might be a bit big, but they'll do. Take a shower. You look like you need it. He wasn't wrong. I felt grimy and exhausted. I nodded mutely and headed back to the bedroom. Inside, laid out on the bed, was a soft gray sweater and a pair of black sweatpants. They smelled clean faintly of his cologne. I hesitated for a moment, then stripped off my rumpled clothes from yesterday and stepped into the ensuite bathroom. The shower was incredible, a waterfall of hot water that washed away some of the grime and tension from my body. As the steam filled the room, I leaned my head against the cool tiles and finally let myself think. Dante, the powerful, intimidating alpha who ran the company with an iron fist. The man who seemed to exist on a completely different plane than a struggling omega like me. Why would he go to all this trouble, bringing me to his home, caring for me? It was so out of character. Or at least, the character I thought he was. Maybe I had misjudged him. Maybe this was some new, elaborate form of torment. When I came out of the bathroom, dressed in his comfortable clothes, I felt a little more human. I walked back out to the main living area. Dante was standing by the window, looking out at the city, his hands in his pockets. He turned as he heard me approach. Feeling better? He asked. I nodded. I said, my voice still small. For everything. He gestured to the plush sofa. Sit. We need to talk. My stomach did a nervous flip. Here it comes, I thought. It's going to fire me for my little breakdown yesterday. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands twisting in my lap. He sat in an armchair opposite me, creating a space between us. He didn't speak right away, just watched me, his expression serious. Liam, he began, his voice low and steady. What you said yesterday? About being hungry? About how tired you are? Is that true? I swallowed hard. I could lie, try to save face, but what was the point? He had seen me at my absolute worst. I just nodded, looking down at my hands. Things have been difficult, I admitted. He sighed, a deep sound that seemed to hold a world of frustration. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you ask for help? I let out a short, bitter laugh. Ask for help? From who? And say what? Excuse me, Mr. Dante, sir? I know you're a busy and important alpha, but this poor little omega can't afford to eat 3 meals a day? I have my pride. Pride won't feed you, he countered, his voice sharp but not unkind. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking genuinely troubled. I stared at my boss, Dante, my hands clenched into fists on my lap. The termination letter felt like a block of ice on the coffee table between us. Why? Why did you fire me? The words were a raw whisper, torn from a throat tight with unshed tears. For weeks, I'd poured my heart and soul into the Horizon project. I'd secured the deal. I'd handled the contracts. I'd worked late nights until my vision blurred. I thought I'd finally proven myself. And for what? To be discarded like this? Dante leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His usually stern expression was complicated, a mixture of frustration and something else I couldn't quite name. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare sign of agitation. Listen to me, Kai. I didn't fire you because of your performance. I fired you to protect you. Protect me. I scoffed, the sound bitter and hollow in the vast, opulent office that suddenly felt like a cage. Protect me from what? Success? You're kicking me out on the street, Dante? How is that protecting me? My voice cracked on his name, and I hated how vulnerable I sounded. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. Someone is trying to frame you, Kai. They're stealing the funds from the Horizon Project. They've been manipulating the records to make it look like you're the one who's responsible. You were the one who handled the contracts. You closed the deal. Every digital footprint, every signature leads back to you. They were setting a trap, and you were about to walk right into it. Firing you was the only way I could pull you out before it snapped shut. I sat there, frozen on the plush leather sofa inside the most expensive penthouse I had ever seen. Dante's private residence, not his office. The city lights twinkled below like a distant, uncaring galaxy. My mind reeled, trying to process his words. Embezzlement? A frame-up? It sounded like something out of a movie, not my life. My face must have been a mask of shock, pale and drawn. For the past few days since being fired, I hadn't been eating, hadn't been sleeping. I was just a ghost, haunted by failure. Now this. Someone wants to trap me? To blame me for their crime? My voice was so low I barely recognized it as my own. Felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, leaving me in a terrifying freefall. Yes. Dante's voice was firm, pulling me back from the edge of panic. His gaze was intense, unwavering. I'm already investigating who's behind it. I have my suspicions, but I need proof. Until I find it, you're a target. Being fired, being publicly disgraced, it makes you look like a victim, not a culprit. It buys us time. But where do I go? What do I do? My apartment lease was tied to my employment. My savings wouldn't last a month in this city. The full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was jobless, penniless, and apparently I had a secret enemy trying to ruin my life. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the glittering cityscape outside blurred into a smear of light. You're staying here. I blinked, my focus slowly returning to Dante's face. Here, in your penthouse. I must have misheard him. The idea was absurd. This was Dante Moretti, the ruthless alpha CEO of Moretti Industries. A man who barely acknowledged my existence outside of work. He nodded, his expression unreadable. You're not safe on your own right now, Liam. Whoever is doing this knows your routine, your address. Here, you'll be secure. My security team is the best in the world. No one gets in or out without my knowledge. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was too much. A week ago, he was just my intimidatingly handsome, unattainable boss. Now he was my self-appointed guardian, offering me sanctuary in his lavish sky palace. Didn't make sense. Why would he go to such lengths for me? I was just a junior project manager, an Omega at that. Replaceable. Dante stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to me. He looked out at the sprawling metropolis he seemed to own. I don't let people destroy what's mine. He turned back to face me, his silver eyes locking onto mine. For now, you just need to rest and stay hidden. Let me handle this. I promise you, Liam. I will find who did this, and I will make them pay. What's his? Did he mean the project, or did he mean me? My Omega instincts, which I usually kept suppressed with blockers and sheer willpower, layered to life, sending a confusing jolt through my system. His scent, a subtle mix of sandalwood and rain I'd only ever caught faint whiffs of in the office, seemed to fill the room, wrapping around me like a protective blanket. It was calming, grounding me in the midst of my turmoil. I didn't know what to believe. My logical mind was screaming that this was crazy, that I should run. But my instincts, my exhausted body, and the shattered pieces of my heart were telling me to trust him. Looking into his determined eyes, I saw something I'd never seen there before. A fierce, protective glint that was aimed squarely at me. For the first time in days, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to sprout in the barren wasteland of my despair. I was no longer alone in this nightmare. Dante was with me. For some reason, that felt like the safest place in the world to be. so I stayed. I let his housekeeper show me to a guest room that was bigger than my entire apartment, with a view that could make a king weep. That night, wrapped in sheets that felt like silk, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The faint, lingering scent of sandalwood and rain standing guard outside my door. The fight was far from over, but at least now I had an alpha in my corner. And not just any alpha. I had Dante. "From now on," he said, his voice dropping to a low, possessive rumble that resonated deep in my chest, "things are going to be different. You're going to eat. You're going to rest. I'll make sure of it." My eyes widened. What did he mean by that? I don't understand, I stammered. He stood up and walked over to me, closing the distance between us. Ow. He crouched down in front of the sofa, so we were at eye level. His scent, which I had only ever caught faint whiffs of at the office, a powerful, intoxicating mix of sandalwood and something wild. Like a forest after the rain was now surrounding me, making my head spin. It was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. It felt safe. "It means I'm going to take care of you," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my forehead. His touch was like an electric shock, sending warmth spreading through my entire body. My omega instincts, which I had suppressed for so long just to survive, were suddenly screaming at me, recognizing him, responding to him. He was an alpha, a powerful alpha. He was claiming me. Not with words, not yet, but with his scent, his presence, his actions. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was crazy. This was impossible. My boss, the man I thought was my tormentor, was looking at me with an intensity and a possessiveness that I had only ever read about. And the most terrifying part? I wasn't pushing him away. A part of me, a deep, instinctual part, was leaning into it, craving more. The world had turned upside down in less than 24 hours, and I had a feeling it was never going to be the same again. Dante's phone suddenly vibrated on the coffee table, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between us. He glanced at the caller ID, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before he stood up and walked towards the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of diamonds against the dark velvet of the night. I watched his reflection in the glass, the way his shoulders tensed as he brought the phone to his ear. His voice was a low murmur, too quiet for me to make out the words, but the rigid line of his jaw told me this wasn't a casual chat. He paced slowly, a caged predator in his own luxurious apartment. The initial calm he'd shown earlier had evaporated, replaced by an aura of cold authority I rarely saw directed at anyone but his business rivals. I sipped my wine, trying to give him the illusion of privacy, but my senses were on high alert. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The scent of ozone, a telltale sign of a distressed alpha, began to faintly permeate the air, sharp and electric. It pricked at my senses, making the fine hairs on my arms stand up. After what felt like an eternity, he ended the call with a sharp, clipped word. He didn't turn around immediately. He just stood there, staring out at the sprawling metropolis, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. When he finally faced me, his expression was grim, his eyes like chips of ice. "It was my secretary," he said, his voice flat. "We've been investigating a discrepancy in the accounts for weeks. A significant amount of money has been embezzled from the company." I set my glass down, my heart sinking. I knew how much his company meant to him, how he'd built it from the ground up. "Dante, I'm so sorry. Do they know who did it?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, yes, they know. The funds were traced to a shell company with a Swiss bank account." He paused, taking a deep breath as if to steel himself. The scent of his distress intensified, and I had to fight the instinct to go to him, to offer comfort I wasn't sure he'd accept in this state. "The company," he continued, his voice laced with a bitterness that chilled me to the bone, "is registered under a name we are all too familiar with." He looked at me then, and the raw fury in his gaze made me flinch. It was Director Zhang, my dear uncle's nephew. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Director Zhang, his own family. The betrayal was a palpable thing in the room, a venom that tainted everything. This wasn't just business, this was personal. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my gut that Dante would not let this go. The storm had just begun. Dante meticulously sorted through every piece of evidence he had gathered. It was a mountain of documents, audio recordings, and encrypted files. Each one a nail in the coffin he was building for Director Zhang. With a deep breath, compiled everything into a secure digital package and sent it anonymously to the Bureau for investigation. Within hours, the wheels of justice began to turn, faster than Dante had dared to hope. News channels lit up with reports of a sudden raid on the corporation's headquarters. Director Zhang was seen being led away in handcuffs, his usual arrogant smirk replaced by a look of pure shock. The initial reports were vague, citing suspicion of illegal corporate practices and human rights violations. The Bureau was tight-lipped. But the city was buzzing with speculation. For the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope. Dante watched the news unfold, his lip pressed tight. The police had begun their formal investigation, detaining Director Zhang for intensive questioning. They were trying to unravel the complex web of deceit and find the true mastermind pulling the strings. The evidence Dante provided was damning against the director, painting a clear picture of his direct involvement in numerous illegal schemes. However, it was cleverly constructed to stop just short of implicating the shadowy figure at the very top. Dante knew the director was just a high-level pawn, a puppet dancing to someone else's tune. The investigators hit a wall. Every lead that pointed towards the mastermind seemed to dissolve into thin air. The evidence was solid enough to put Director Zhang away for a very long time, but it wasn't enough to expose the real power behind him. It was a frustrating dead end. The mastermind had covered their tracks too well, leaving Zhang to take the fall alone. Dante wasn't surprised. He knew this would be a long fight. This was just the first battle, a crucial victory, but the war was far from over. He powered down his monitor, the reflection in the dark screen showing a determined face. He had drawn first blood, but now he had to be more careful than ever. The real enemy was aware of a threat now, and they would be hunting for the source of the leak. Dante had to stay calm while he planned his next move. The fall of Director Zhang sent a shockwave through the city, but the real monster was still lurking in the shadows, and Dante knew he was the only one who could drag it into the light. The game had just begun, and he was ready to play. Dante sat in his sterile high-rise office, the city lights twinkling below like a distant, uncaring galaxy. The sharp lines of his desk were cluttered with documents, each one a testament to the latest crisis, shareholder complaints. His company's stock falls, a legacy from his father, was under siege. He rubbed his temples, the scent of expensive coffee doing little to stave off the bone-deep weariness. His phone buzzed, a sharp, unwelcome intrusion. He expected another angry email, another demand for his head. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. It was a picture, Liam. His beautiful, vibrant Liam slumped in a chair, his wrists and ankles bound with cruel ropes. His eyes were closed, his head lolling to one side.
Ow.
He looked so fragile, so broken. Beneath the image, a simple, chilling message. Stop digging, or he dies. The air in the room became thick, suffocating. Every complaint, every financial report, every single worry about the company evaporated, replaced by a singular, primal fear that clawed at his throat. This wasn't about the company anymore. It was about Liam. His Uncle David. The name echoed in his mind, a venomous whisper. He'd suspected David for months, noticing discrepancies in the accounts, funds disappearing into phantom projects. He had started a quiet investigation, tracing the digital breadcrumbs, getting closer to the truth. David, his own flesh and blood, was embezzling from the company, bleeding it dry. Now he had taken Kai to silence him. A wave of white-hot rage surged through Dante, so potent it nearly brought him to his knees. He would burn the world down to get Kai back. His fingers flew across his phone, his movements sharp and precise. First a call to Leo, his head of security, a man whose loyalty was forged in steel. Liam has been taken. I'm sending you a picture and a number. I need everything you have on it now. His voice was dangerously calm, a low growl that promised retribution. Next, he dialed Ren, a legendary hacker who owed him a favor, a ghost in the machine who could bend the digital world to his will. Ren, I need you. It's life or death. Trace this number, find the location. I don't care what you have to do. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Dante paced his office like a caged panther, the city lights mocking him with their indifference. He felt utterly powerless, a feeling he despised. His empire meant nothing if Liam wasn't safe. He thought back to the first time he saw him. It was during an interview for a junior marketing position. Liam had walked in not with the usual nervous energy of a recent graduate, but with a quiet confidence that was captivating. He wasn't just an Omega, he was a force of nature. Dante remembered sitting in a high-stakes meeting, his board of directors ready to tear a new project apart. Liam, then just an assistant, had stood up to present a section of the report. He spoke with such clarity and passion, his arguments so well-reasoned, that he silenced the entire room. Dante saw not just a brilliant employee, but a partner, an equal, and his smile. God, that smile. It was rare, but when it appeared, it was like the sun breaking through the clouds, a warmth that reached deep into Dante's guarded heart and made it beat a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. He had fallen for Liam long before he ever admitted it to himself. He had watched him from afar, manufacturing reasons to cross his path, just to catch a glimpse of that smile, to hear his voice. He was the Alpha CEO, feared and respected, yet this Omega had dismantled all his defenses without even trying. He was supposed to be in control, but with Liam, he was hopelessly completely lost. His phone rang, shattering the torturous silence. It was Ren. Got him. An abandoned warehouse district by the old docks. Sending you the schematics now. They're using a burner, but they're sloppy. I've got a lock on their digital footprint. Hope, fierce and sharp, pierced through the despair. Dante was already relaying the information to Leo. Full team. Silent entry. Want David alive. The others are optional. I'm on my way. He grabbed his keys, his knuckles white. The time for strategy was over. This was personal. The drive was a blur of red lights and screaming tires. The warehouse was a skeletal structure silhouetted against the murky night sky. Leo's team was already in position, shadows moving with practiced ease. Dante didn't wait. He moved with them, his mind a cold, calculating machine focused on one objective. Liam. They breached the entrance. A symphony of silent, coordinated action. The warehouse was cavernous and smelled of dust and decay. In the center, under a single, harsh light, was the scene from the photograph. Kai was there, tied to the chair. Standing over him, a gun in his hand, was Uncle David.
Dante.
So glad you could make it, David sneered, his face a mask of bitter resentment. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? Had to play the hero, just like your father. Let him go, David. Dante's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It's over. It's over when I say it is. This company should have been mine. I built it with your father, and he left it all to you. Suddenly, Liam's eyes fluttered open. He looked dazed, confused. But when he saw Dante, a flicker of recognition, of relief, crossed his face. That was all the motivation Dante needed. As David was distracted by his own monologue, Leo's team descended. In a flash, it was over. David was disarmed and restrained, his furious shouts echoing in the vast space. Dante didn't spare him a second glance. He rushed to Liam, his hands fumbling with the knots. Liam, are you okay? Did he hurt you? He gently cupped Liam's face, his thumbs stroking his cheeks. Liam leaned into his touch, a soft sigh escaping his lips. Dante, I knew you'd come. He was bruised and shaken, but he was alive. Dante pulled him into a fierce embrace, burying his face in Liam's hair, inhaling his scent, reassuring himself that he was real, that he was safe. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a raw, overwhelming emotion. He held Liam at arm's length, his eyes searching his. Liam, he said, his voice thick with a feeling he'd suppressed for far too long. I was so scared. Later, after the police had taken a sputtering David away and the medics had checked Liam over, they sat in the back of Dante's car, the city sliding past them. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Dante turned to him. Liam, when I saw that picture, I realized that nothing else matters. Not the company, not the money, nothing. Only you. He took a deep breath, the confession feeling like a leap into the unknown. I love you. I think I've loved you since the day you walked into that interview. I love your confidence. I love your passion. And God, I love your smile. It's the only thing that makes my heart feel alive. He paused, his own heart hammering against his ribs. Liam, will you be my boyfriend? Officially? Slow, beautiful smile spread across Liam's face, the very smile that had captured Dante's heart. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Dante," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been in love with you for years. Since my first day, I thought you'd never see me." He leaned in and pressed his lips against Dante's, a soft, hesitant kiss that was full of promise, of years of unspoken longing finally set free. In that moment, wrapped in the safety of Dante's arms, they weren't an alpha and an omega, a CEO and his employee. They were just two people, finally home. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next video.